Hello everyone. So in today's video, we are going to go over and discuss the paper titled HopeEDI, a multilingual hope speech detection dataset for equality, diversity and inclusion. So this is a paper by Bharti Raja Chakrabarti, and this paper is from December 2020, so quite recent, and it was published in the third workshop of on computational modeling of people's opinions, personality and emotions in social media. So this title of Hope Speech was really intriguing for me because this was the first time ever when I've heard this phrase in use. So let's just delve into the paper itself. So he's from the National University of Ireland. Alright. So over the past few years, systems have been developed to control online content and eliminate abusive, offensive, or hate speech content. We are all familiar with this. However, people in power sometimes misuse this form of censorship to obstruct the democratic right of freedom of speech. We've seen this in many countries, where citing certain reasons, the government does not allow people to use these platforms and publish their views. Therefore, it is imperative that research should take a positive reinforcement approach towards online content that is encouraging positive and supportive content. Until now, most studies are focused on solving the problem of negativity in the English language, though the problem is much more than harmful content. Furthermore, it is multilingual as well. Thus, we have constructed a Hope Speech dataset for equality, diversity, and inclusion, Hope EDI for short, which contains user-generated comments from social media platform YouTube with 28,451 English, 20,198 Tamil, and 10,705 Malayalam comments, which were manually labeled as Hope Speech or not. To our knowledge, this is the first research of its kind to annotate Hope Speech for equality, diversity, and inclusion in the multilingual setting. We determined that the inter-annotator agreement of our dataset using Krippendorf's alpha. Further, we create several baselines to benchmark the resulting dataset, and the results have been expressed using precision, recall, and F1 score. The dataset is publicly available to the research community. We hope that this resource will spur further research on encouraging inclusive and uh, responsive speech that reinforces positiveness. All right. So this is a very interesting thing. So far I've read a lot of hate speech related papers, and they were focusing on curbing the negativity by finding the negativity and looking at context of when the words occurred as hate speech or not. There was a 2012 paper which dealt with hate speech essentially as a problem of word sense disambiguation. So this could be a maybe a good thing if used alongside that. So if you have a two-layer network, one classifying messages as hope speech and one as hate speech, and then wherever you have agreements, you can easily use confirm. Where you don't, you can use other models. So this could be a good direction of work. I'm not really sure, but this seems very interesting to me. All right. So about the introduction. With the expansion of the internet, there has been substantial growth all over the world in the number of marginalized people looking for support online. Recently, due to lockdowns enforced as a consequence of the pandemic, people have started to look at online forums as an emotional outlet where they can go through a tough time when they go through a tough time. Yeah, so we've all seen this. Forums, public forums have had discussions, people have been supportive of each other, and the communities have come together as a whole to help people in need. The importance of the online life of the marginalized population, such as women in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and management, people who belong to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and queer, questioning LGBTIQ community, racial minorities, or people with disabilities have been studied, and it has been proven that the online life of vulnerable individuals uh, produces a significant impact on their self definition. Yep. So people view themselves in some light, and it has been noticed that the life which they lead online also contributes to it. Furthermore, according to these papers, the social networking activities of a vulnerable individual plays an essential role in shaping their personality and how they look at society. So I guess this was all something which we can easily grasp. So comments posts on online social media have been analyzed to find and stop the spread of negativity using methods such as hate speech detection, offensive language detection, and abusive language detection. According to Davidson et al., technologies developed for the detection of abusive language do not consider the potential bias of the dataset that they are trained on. So we also had a look at one. I guess this was the paper only, where they considered 5 datasets and they showcased how the datasets are biased when talking about standard American and African American English contexts. The systematic bias in the datasets causes abusive language detection to be biased and may discriminate against one group over the other. This will have a negative impact on minorities, so we should uh, turn our work towards spreading positivity instead of curbing an individual's freedom of speech by removing negative comments. Therefore, we turn our research towards hope speech. Hope is commonly associated with the promise, potential, support, reassurance, suggestions, or inspiration provided to participants by their peers during periods of illness, stress, loneliness, and depression. So this is how hope was defined by Snyder et al. In 2002. So psychologists, sociologists, and social workers in the Association of Hope have concluded that hope can also be a useful tool for saving people from suicide or harming themselves. Yep. Thus, Hope speech delivered by gay rights activist Harvey Milk on the steps of the San Francisco City Hall during a mass rally to celebrate California Gay Freedom Day on 25 June 1978 inspired millions to demand rights for equality, diversity, and inclusion. Alright, so I'm not familiar with this, but I'll check this up. This seems to be a very influential speech. However, to the best of our knowledge, no prior work has explored hope speech for women in STEM, LGBTIQ individuals, racial minorities, or people with disabilities in general. Moreover, although people of various linguistic backgrounds are exposed to online social media language, English is still at the center of ongoing trends in language technology research. Yep. So you can see most papers build English datasets focused on English specific tasks because in other languages the task may be vastly different or totally impossible to do using the same model. Recently, some research studies have been conducted on high resource languages such as Arabic, German, Hindi, and Italian. However, such studies usually use monolingual corpora and do not examine code switch textual data. Code switching is basically when you have multiple languages in the same sentence. So, if suppose you speak in Hindi, then you'll often have English words sweeping in it. So, I'll just, for instance, if there's the English sentence, please do this for me, and you convert it into Hindi, more often than not, you'll hear people say, please mere liye ye kar do, which has a weird combination of English and Hindi. Please from English and the rest part of the sentence from Hindi. So this is a code switch language. Secondly, they use the term high resource languages. High resource languages are basically languages which have large corpora which can be used for analysis. So we introduce a dataset for hope speech identification not only in English but also in under-resourced code switch Tamil and Malayalam. Alright. The key contributions of the paper can be summarized as follows. So we propose to encourage hope speech rather than take away the freedom of speech. We apply a schema to create a multilingual hostility diffusing hope speech dataset for EDI. And this is a new large-scale dataset of English, Tamil, and Malayalam. Malayalam and Tamil are code switched YouTube comments with high-quality annotation. We performed an experiment on Hope Speech dataset for equality, diversity, and inclusion using different state-of-the-art ML models to create benchmark systems. Alright. So let's now have a look at the related works. When it came to crawling social media data, there has been works on YouTube mining, mainly focusing on exploiting user comments. So Krishna et al. Did an opinion mining and trend analysis. The researchers made an analysis of the sentiments to identify their threats, seasonality, and forecast, and it was found that user sentiments are well correlated with the influence of real-world events. Of course, when some huge incident happens in the real world, you'll see comments on uh, videos also reflect that. Severin et al. 2014 did a systematic study on opinion mining targeting YouTube comments. The authors developed a comment corpus containing 35,000 manually labeled data for modeling the opinion polarity of the comments based on tree kernel models. Chakravarti et al., both from 2020, collected comments from YouTube and created a manually annotated corpora for sentiment analysis of under-resourced Tamil and Malayalam languages. Alright, so I guess this is the same paper. I think this is the same author. In one of our previous papers, he must have done this. So methods to mitigate gender bias in NLP have been extensively studied in English. Some studies have investigated gender bias beyond the English language using machine translation to French and other languages. Tatman studied the gender and dialect bias in automatically generating captions from YouTube. So I read in one of the papers as well that models perform very poorly when they are asked to caption women as compared to men. Technologies for abusive language, hate speech, and offensive language detection being developed and applied without the potential are being developed and applied without considering the potential biases. However, current gender debiasing methods in NLP are not sufficient to debias other issues related to EDI and end-to-end systems of many language technology applications, which causes unrest and escalates the issue with EDI. EDI, as we were discussing, equality, diversity, and inclusiveness. Uh, so as well as leading to more inequality on digital platforms. So basically, what they're saying is uh, there has been certain works, have been some works in English, there have been some works in other languages as well using machine translation. But one thing which they do not consider much is the potential bias in the dataset, and another thing which they do not consider much is uh, how uh, the methods are still not sufficient for debiasing the entire work or corpus. So, for instance, you have the gender debiasing methods, and they are still not sufficient, which can lead to inequality or lack of inclusiveness. So, counter narratives is another strategy which has received the attention of researchers recently. A counter narrative approach was proposed to weigh the right to freedom of speech and avoid overblocking. Matthew et al. Created and released a dataset for counter speech using comments from YouTube. However, the core idea to directly intervene with textual responses escalates hostility, even though it is advantageous to the writer to understand why the comment or post has been deleted or blocked and then favorably change the discourse and attitude of the comments. So, we turn our research to finding positive information such as hope and encouraging such activities. So basically, counter narratives we've also discussed in previous videos, where for a certain piece of hate speech, uh, the model will generate some counter narrative which will respond and will be custom tailored to that piece of hate speech. But that also has its problems. So even though it will inform the person about why their post was blocked, but it still has chance of inducing some more hostility. So recently, a work by Palakudeti et al. Analyzed how to use hope speech from social media to diffuse tension between two nuclear power stations and support minority Rohingya refugees. However, the author's definition of hope is just defined to diffuse tension and violence. It does not take other perspectives of hope and EDI. The authors did not give more information such as the inter-annotator agreement, diversity in annotators, and the details of the dataset. The dataset is not publicly available. It was created in English and Hindi and other languages related known to the Rohingyas. Our works differ from the previous works in that way they introduce a dataset for English, Tamil, and Malayalam. And this is the first work to create a EDI dataset in Tamil and Malayalam, which are under-resourced languages. So basically, under-resourced meaning there is not much literature to support them. All right. Hope speech. Sorry, did I say not much literature? It means that there is not much data set or corpus which have been computerized. So, hope speech. Hope is considered significant for the well being, recuperation, and restoration of human life by health professionals. So, this is general stuff, I'll just breeze through it. Hope can be defined as an optimistic state of mind which depends on the desire for positive results regarding the occasions and conditions of one's life or the world at large, and it is presented and future oriented. Hope can come from inspirational talks about how people face difficult situations and survive them. Hope speech engenders optimism and resilience that positively influences many aspects of life, including work, college, and other aspects that make us vulnerable. We define hope speech for a problem as YouTube comments or posts that offer support, reassurance, suggestions, inspiration, and insight. So, hope speech reflects the belief that one can discover pathways to the desired objective and become aroused to utilize those pathways. Our work aims to change the prevalent way of thinking by moving away from a preoccupation with discrimination, loneliness, or the worst things of life to building confidence, support, and good qualities based on the comments by individuals. Thus, we have provided instructions to annotators that if a comment post meets the following condition, then it should be annotated as hope speech. So, all right. So basically, they're saying that now they are focusing on hope speech. They've defined hope, and they've defined which comments they are considering hope speech based comments. So comments which offer support, reassurance, suggestion, inspiration, insight, and these are the guidelines. So it should contain inspiration, promote well-being, satisfaction, trigger constructive cognition about the future, expressive of love, courage, etc. Encourages compliance with COVID-19 guidelines, promotes equality, diversity, inclusion, brings out the survival story of one of these people, talks about fairness, talks about a hopeful future, talks about and say no to division in any form, expresses positive peace speaking intents, and non-hope speech, racially, ethnically, sexual or nationally motivated slurs, produce hate towards a minority, very prejudiced, do not inspire hope from the reader's mind. So I guess this was pretty self-explanatory why each point should be in the respective category, and they also have non-hope speech, which is like the second. There are two categories: hope speech and non-hope speech. But non-hope speech is not always hate speech. So, for instance, if someone just writes, how is that the same thing? It is not non-hope. It is not hate speech, but neither is it hope speech. So it lies in non-hope hate speech, non-hope speech. Again, we have society says don't assume, but they assume to anyways. This is non-hope speech, but it is not hate speech. So hate speech or offensive language detection is not available for code mix Tamil and code mix Malayalam, and it does not take into account LGBTIQ, women in STEM, and other minorities. Thus, we cannot use existing hate speech or offensive language detection datasets. So, the existing datasets, for instance, from Banerjee et al. In 2020, they do not have these features. So now they focus on the data set construction part. So we focus on collecting data from SMP, social media comments on YouTube, which is most widely used platform in the world. We avoided taking comments from personal coming out stories as it had reference to personal details. We manually removed the videos for personally coming out stories. For English, we collected data on recent topics of EDI, including women in STEM, LGBTIQ issues, COVID-19, BLM, UK versus China, US versus China, Australia versus China, etc. So the data was collected from videos of people from English-speaking countries, such as all of these. For Tamil and Malayalam, we collected data from India on the recent topics regarding LGBTIQ issues, women in STEM, Indo-China war, Dravidian affairs. India is a multilingual and a multiracial country. Linguistically, India can be divided into three major languages: the Dravidian, Indo-Aryan, and Tibeto-Burman languages. The recent dispute on the Indo-China border has triggered racism on the internet towards people with Mongoloid features, even though they are Indians from the northeastern states. Similarly, the NEP, which advocates for the introduction of Sanskrit or Hindi, has escalated issues regarding the linguistic autonomy of Dravidian languages in the state of Tamil Nadu. We use the YouTube comment scraper to collect comments. We collected data on the above topics from November 2019 to June 2020. We believe that our dataset will diffuse hostility and inspire hope. Our data is produced as a multilingual resource to allow cross-lingual studies and approaches. In particular, it contains hope speech in English, Tamil, and Malayalam. So basically, what they say, they've described how did they get the data. So, like the key points, first of all, they did not use personal coming out stories because if some person is attacking them or supporting them, they might be very personal or specific to them and have references which may not work in the general context. So they did not use such personal videos. Secondly, for India, they've identified the three major language families, and then they've discussed the major issues which have been pain points for the Indian society. Now about code mixing. Code mixing is a phenomenon when a speaker uses two or more languages in a single utterance. It is prominent in multilingual speakers. Traditionally, code mixing has been associated with inadequate or informal knowledge of the language. However, research has shown that it is quite frequent in user generated social media content. For a multilingual country like India, code mixing is quite frequent. As our data comes from YouTube or our Tamil and Malayalam dataset is code mixed. We have come across all three types of code mixing, such as tag, interstitial, and intrastitial in our corpus. Our corpus is also also has code mixing using Latin script and native script. Okay, so basically they're describing what code mixing is as we discussed. I gave you an example as well earlier, and so now they've discussed how they got the dataset. So in the previous section they discussed the exact process. In this dataset they have described the characteristics of the data. So the Tamil and Malayalam dataset is code mixed because people on YouTube use multiple languages simultaneously. So it is code mixing using Latin and native scripts. So Latin scripts include English, I believe. So ethical concerns. Social media data is highly sensitive, and even so, when it is related to minority population, so when we have taken full consideration to minimize the risk associated with individual identity in the data by removing personal information from datasets such as name, but not celebrity names. So if some celebrity is referenced, then that is kept. However, to study EDI, we need to keep information relating to the following characteristics: racial, gender, sexual orientation, ethnic origin, and philosophical beliefs. Annotators were only shown anonymized posts and agreed to make no attempt to contact the comment creator. The dataset will only be made available for research purposes to the researcher who agree to follow ethical guidelines. Alright, so you need to follow the ethical guidelines to access the dataset, and then they've discussed how the annotators confirmed that they will not contact the people who wrote these comments. So now we have the annotation set up. After data collection, we clean the data using lang detect. However, there were unintended comments of other languages in the cleaned corpus of Tamil and Malayalam due to code mixing. Finally, we identified three classes, two of which are hope and not hope, based on their definition, while the other category are other languages, which were introduced to account for comments that were not in the required language. So when you're scraping, it's not always that you'll get Malayalam or Tamil based comments. There might be say some Marathi based comments as well, which might mingle in. Then you need to separate them out from the dataset. So they created a different class for it. These specific set of classes were selected because they provided an adequate level of generalization. Now for annotators, we created G forms to collect annotation from annotator. Each form contained a maximum of 100 comments, and each page contained a maximum of 10 comments to maintain the quality of annotations. So basically, the annotations were given to the annotators, and at a time they got 10 annotations to do. So they collected information in gender, educational background, and the medium of schooling of the annotator to know diversity and avoid bias. The annotators were warned that comments might have abusive language and offensive language. The annotator were given the choice to stop annotating if they found a comment to be too disturbing or something that they cannot handle. So they educated the annotators. A minimum of three annotators annotated each form. As a warm-up procedure, after the first form containing 100 comments were annotated, the results were manually checked. This scheme was utilized to refine their understanding of the assignment and to improve the understanding of EDI. A few annotators dropped out and those annotations were discarded. The annotators were asked to watch the EDI videos again and reread the annotation guidelines. Alright, so that they do not forget what exactly they are tackling. So in the table they have the different annotator uh, guide, the different annotator distributions. So for instance, there were 11 English-speaking annotators who belonged to Ireland, UK, US, and Australia. One was undergrad, four were graduates, and six were postgraduates. Four were male, five were female, and two were non-binary. So similarly, you have for Tamil and Malayalam as well. Most of the annotators were graduate or postgraduate students. Next, we have the inter-annotator agreement. So to aggregate the Hope speech annotation from multiple annotators, we opted for the majority. So the the comments that did not have a majority in the first round were collected, and a separate Google form was created to annotate them by new annotators. We calculated the inter-annotator agreement about the final round of annotation, and we reported inter-annotator agreement using the Krippendorf's alpha for assessing the clarity. The Krippendorf's alpha is a statistical measure of agreement among annotators to answer how much resulting data can be relied upon to represent real data. So although Krippendorf's alpha is computationally complex, it is more relevant to our case as more than two annotators annotated the same comment and the same annotator did not annotate all the sentences. It is not affected by missing data, takes into account varying the sample sizes, categories, the number of raters, and can also be employed for any measurement level, such as nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So they use NLTK for calculating this, and they had a agreement of 0.63 for English, 0.76 for Tamil, and 0.85 for Malayalam using the nominal metric. So basically, they've described the process even further. So if there were say five annotators and four said A and one said B, then A was taken. However, if there was no clarity, then they were again put in another form and new annotators were asked to review them. Then they used the statistical tool uh, called Krippendorf's alpha to measure the inter-annotator agreement, and they've explained why they did that because even though it is more computationally complex, their use case allowed it, and it was more fitting for their use case. And then they use to use it, they use NLTK's inbuilt library, and so NLTK is a Python library which is extensively used for natural language processing. So now the corpus statistics. So in total our dataset contained 59,354 comments from YouTube, with 28,451 comments in English, 20,198 comments in Tamil, and 10,705 comments in Malayalam. And table 2 shows the distribution of our dataset. We use NLTK tool to tokenize words and sentences in the comments to calculate corpus statistics as shown. The vocabulary for Tamil and Malayalam is high due to different types of code mixing. Uh, this table shows that. So you can see they have a high vocabulary. Table 3 presents the distribution of the annotated dataset by label. The dataset is skewed with almost a majority as not hope. This is common for user-generated content on online platforms, and an automated detection system needs to be able to handle imbalanced data in order to be truly useful. So we have a considerable amount of other language labels for Tamil and Malayalam. This is due to high code mixing phenomenon occurring in the comments of these languages. So basically, in those videos, people are using highly code mixed languages. So the fully annotated dataset was broken into 80% training, 10% dev, and 10% testing for the models. And this is pretty standard stuff. Now, the case of ambiguous comments. So there were some comments which were ambiguous. For instance, God gave us a choice, or chanting BLM is racist, or Sri Lankan Tamil history party Pessinga. So I'm not able to read these because I'm not very proficient. I'm not at all proficient with Tamil and Malayalam. So I guess you can just see that these were ambiguous according to the annotators. Now some benchmarking experiments. So we reported our dataset using a wide range of standard classifiers on the unbalanced setting of the dataset. The experiment was applied on the TF-IDF of tokens. They use sklearn to create baseline classifiers. So for multinomial naive Bayes, we set alpha zero point 0.7. We use a grid search for the nearest KNN, SVM, decision tree, and logistic regression. More details about the parameters will be published in the code. Okay, so first of all, scikit-learn. Scikit-learn is also a machine learning library. So, oh, I should have opened it here. So basically, this is scikit-learn, and it is extensively used for machine learning. So let me just scroll back. Right. So models were trained on the training set. The dev set was used to fine tune. and it was finally used on the held out test set. To report the performance, we used a macro average F score calculated using macro average precision and recall. So, what is actually is macro average F score? Arithmetic mean of individual class precision and recall. So, for each class, they computed the F1 and then they averaged it. The motivation behind such a choice is due to imbalanced class distribution. All right. So for each class they'll have it. Then uh, it won't really matter what the size of the class is, which makes well-known measures such as accuracy and micro-average F-score not well representative of the performance. Since the performance of all classes of interest, we also report the precision recall and the weighted F-score of individual classes. So these tables report that along with the different models, and these are the baseline classifiers. As shown, all the models perform poorly due to class imbalance problem. The SVM classifier achieved the lowest performance with a macro average F score of 0.32, 0.21, and 0.28 respectively. For the languages, decision tree had a slightly higher one. Then they used language identification to remove the non-intended language comments from our dataset. However, there were some comments that were annotators as other language. This caused another imbalance in our dataset. Most of the macro scores were less for English due to other language label. This can be avoided for English by merely removing those comments in the dataset. However, for Tamil and Malayalam, the label was necessary as a comment in the language were code mixed and written using a non-native script for the Tamil language. So basically, what they're saying is, first of all, they reported a poor performance. Then they said that for the English language, if they had just removed the comments which were belonging to other languages, then they believed they could have gotten a better performance. But for the other languages, the languages were code mixed and written in Latin English. So, for instance, this is a Tamil sentence, this is a Malayalam sentence, but sorry, both are Tamil sentences, but they are written using Latin script. So Latin meaning written in English characters. So for that, the label was necessary. For the Tamil language, the data distribution was somewhat balanced between hope and non-hope. In order to evaluate the effectiveness of our dataset, we conducted experiments using ML algorithms. We believe the HopeEDI dataset, with its novel method of data collection and annotation, shall revolutionize research in language tech in the future, broaden the horizon, and for research on positivity. So this was a pretty interesting paper and showcased a lot of new stuff. So as online content increases massively, it is necessary to encourage positivity. We've discussed this. In the paper, we presented a largest manual dataset. So they've mentioned the statistics. This dataset can encourage further research and will encourage. And so they aim to promote research in hope speech and encourage positive content in online social media for equality, diversity, and inclusion. In the future, we plan to extend the study by introducing a larger dataset with finer grained classes. So they've thanked the acknowledgements. They've thanked the Scientific Foundation of Ireland and other organizations which help them with grants. And they don't have anything else. So let's just have a look at the tables. So we had a look at them. Oh, sorry about that. So these are the different statistics. So for a SVM, on if you want to see the precision for hope speech, then it is 0. So for using a multinomial based classifier MNB, you have 0.78. Similarly, you can have a look at the recall, etc. as well. So this is for Malayalam, this is for Tamil, and this is for English. Uh, all right. Okay, so does this have to be 0, or I'm not really sure. Uh, does this mean that okay, the precision for hope speech was 0 for SVMs? I was misreading it. So this is the way in which you will like go over these tables. So for instance, if you want to say see the recall for a decision tree model, then you can have a look at decision tree under the recall section. Then for hope speech, the recall was 0.39. For non-hope, it was 0.96. For other languages, it was 0, and so on. So I hope that clears stuff up. So thank you guys for watching. I will catch you all the next time with another interesting paper to read. Please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below any other paper which you would want me to read. Thank you.